it's Beth. Welcome. Today we are kicking off Kendra's Card Challenge 22. So this is the 22nd quarter that Kendra Cards by Kendra has been putting these together. It's basically a PDF that helps you take six 6x6 sheets of pattern paper and turn it into 15 cards. So this is a hop, and so there will be a playlist linked in the description box below for you. So I am kicking off today's kickoff hop with you and am going to kind of walk you through the cutting guide and sketch 1. And then each of the other design team members are going to go show you how to do all 15 sketches. So you'll see lots of inspiration on how to put the sketches together and just on creating the cards in general. And then Cards by Kendra posted a video yesterday for her kickoff, and she explains more about the PDF itself, like how to use the PDF, and more information about her paid Patreon memberships and the prizes that are available for this quarter's kickoff hop. So be sure to check out that playlist linked in the description box below and follow along on the hop and watch all 15 cards. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get my papers cut down and get my card made. So today for my 15 cards, I'm using paper from the Brass and Bliss Abundant Bouquet 6x6 pad. So this has a lot of pretty florals in it, and it does have some like solids on the B sides, but I'm not planning on using those. But one of the benefits of using double-sided paper is that when you make your cuts, like Kendra does tell you on the cutting guide what direction the paper is going to be going in on the card sketches. That's what these little arrows denote. So if you have a directional paper, and no matter what you do, somehow, sometimes there's going to be a piece that is just not the right direction. Usually it's a smaller piece, but by having double-sided paper, you have the flexibility of then turning it over and using the other side if you need to. But my plan is, as of now, to use the A sides, all these pretty florals. So what I did is I have my 6 sheets already picked out, and I went through and looked at the cutting guides and tried to see, of the patterns that I have, which patterns would work best with the cuts I'm making on each of the cutting guides. So you can see that A has a lot of like thin strip and some like kind of small to medium sized pieces. And so even though this is a bigger pattern, there's enough color going on that you should be able to see what it is in the strips and in the smaller pieces. So I chose this for my pattern A. Pattern B does have some bigger pieces on it, but then it also has some strips. And so I'm going with this floral where things are kind of like packed a little bit tighter together for my pattern B. Pattern C and D both have some bigger pieces and some smaller pieces. And so I am going with this kind of like just green leafy pattern for C, and then this floral pattern for D, just because like some of the smaller flowers I think will work better. There's a lot of white space too, but I think it'll be okay even with some of these smaller bits. And then for E and F, these two have like some larger pieces. And so this is my favorite pattern. And so I wanted to make sure I used it for one of these cutting guides because I want to make sure that you can see like just the beautiful floral. So I decided to use this for E and this for F. And kind of the reason I did that was that I looked back here at the chart that shows you what sketches each pattern is going to show up on. And so I kind of had mine laid out like this, like A, B, C, D, E, and F. And I originally had these two switched, but there were a couple of cards where there was either going to be a lot of like the white patterns, like the more white background patterns together, if I had it this way. And so I chose to swap them because in that way, there's a lot of them that use like BD or B, C, D, and E. And so it was going to be a lot of white with white if I went with this pattern as E. And so I chose to go with the colorful pattern for E. I don't know if I explained that really well, but that's just kind of like my thought process and how I choose my papers. Again, you know, I do have the back side if I need to turn these over, like there are some solids which would be helpful. But that is kind of how you might use this particular chart. And then the biggest tip I can give you, the biggest tips, I guess, that I can give you for choosing your papers is one, if you can go non-directional, do so. If you can't go non-directional, use double-sided paper. And then the third tip is to look at the cutting guides and the size of the pieces that you're going to be cutting and let that help you choose your patterns. Because, you know, I wouldn't want to waste this or say this pattern on one that's going to cut a bunch of little tiny pieces because you're not going to get much of the flower in there. So hope that makes sense. But these are the 6 sheets that I'm going to be using, and now we can get into the cutting part. Starting off with cutting guide A, which is my first sheet, I'm going to start where the scissor mark is. Each of the cutting guides has a scissor mark, and that is kind of like the recommended place to start cutting because it goes all the way through the sheet. So I started with the scissor mark, and now I'm going to jump with that left-hand section towards the bottom. There's 2 small squares. I will cut those down and then do the strips that are in the other part of that 3-inch section. I basically just try to find the next cut that goes all the way through the section. So now on the right hand side 3-inch section, I'm starting with that strip at the bottom of the cutting guide. We'll do the vertical strip on the left hand of the section, and then we'll do the smaller cuts on the right hand. Just kind of like basically working through each section. And then you notice I've kind of put everything back in order so it matches the cutting guide there to the right. I have 15 baggies, and they all have a number on it that corresponds to a card sketch. So I'm using the cutting guide to help me pick each piece that goes into that numbered baggie. So there was one piece for number 2, those 2 squares go into my baggie marked number 3, and you can see that I don't have fancy baggies. They are just kind of like repurposed bags from other crafting pursuits, and I just used a post-it note on there to mark the number. You could use envelopes as well. The main thing is just to make sure you keep yourself organized. So moving on to the cutting guide B, I'm going to start there again at the scissor mark at the bottom right and cut that first strip. And then there's the section there at the bottom with the piece marked 12 that has a fishtail kind of like notation there. I'm going to wait until I get to the card sketch to cut the fishtail. Right now I'm just worried about getting all the pieces cut for each of the cards. So this strip has a diagonal piece to it, so I'm just making sure to line up both corners on the channel there in my trimmer, and then holding it down really well, starting in the middle of the piece and then working up and down, and that helps me cut my diagonal. You could totally use scissors too if that would be more comfortable for you. So now I'm working the bottom section of that big chunk that we had left, and then now I'm going to work up at the top. And just turning the paper accordingly to follow the cutting guide. So I'll cut these last 2 pieces, and again I'm going to use the cutting guide to help me figure out which pieces go into which baggies. So one of the other main tips that I can give you for Kendra's card challenges is to stay organized. Whether you're using baggies, envelopes, or numbered piles on your desk, if you have room on your desk or your workspace to just kind of have numbered piles, and as you cut the papers from the cutting guides, put them in the appropriate piles. If you are using single-sided paper, you could totally label the back, but again, you want to keep each number together once all the pieces are cut. It just makes it so much easier and less confusing when you're going to put your cards together later on, if you are organized. So cutting guide C, starting with the scissor mark, working my way up, and then I'm going to focus on that left hand strip there again, looking for the next place where I can cut all the way through whatever piece I'm working on, and then laying them out on the right just like they are on the cutting guide. And once you've worked through the challenge a few times, you'll come up with, whatever method works best for you. You don't have to do it my way. I'm sure that all of the design team members, we all do it a little bit different. So this piece kind of has a diagonal cut through it, but it's not like at the corners. So I'm just using a ruler to measure 1 1/4 inches down from the top right, and then 1 1/4 inches up from the bottom left. I've got my pencil marks, and I am just going to line those up in the channel on my trimmer and cut all the way through, and then that creates my diagonal. And then this piece is just another diagonal cut on the corners, so I'm lining up my corners, starting there in the middle of the piece, and then pushing up and down with the trimmer. And then this strip here has a couple of tiny little squares that get diagonal cuts. So for the first one, I'm going to show you again how you can do it with the trimmer. It is a tiny piece, so you might want to, I don't know if you could tape the edge down a little bit. I'm able to hold it down and cut, but since these are so tiny, it's probably just as easy to bring a pair of scissors and cut from one corner to another. And then now that all of those pieces are cut, I can add those to the baggies. So this quarter, Lynn, LV Handcrafted, myself, and then Kendra are all showing you how to use the cutting guide, how to cut down the pieces, and kind of how to plan your cards. And then again, we have all the design team members who are showing you how to put together all the different sketches throughout the quarter. Some of them may be working through the whole process as well. So there is definitely lots of inspiration to come for this quarter's challenge. So moving on to D, which is the 4th sheet, finding the scissor mark, cutting all the way across, and then this one has a lot of little pieces. So again, I'm going to kind of walk you through each piece or each section as I'm cutting it, just because sometimes with all the little pieces, it can, I guess, be intimidating or seem overwhelming, but it's not, as long as you're, again, looking for the next cut that cuts all the way through. So this piece has a circle, a 1-inch circle that it calls for. And so I happen to have a 1-inch circle punch. So I'm lining it up as far to the right as I can on that strip. I didn't cut the square that the cutting guide calls for first, because it's just easier for me to hold it in the punch if I have that strip to hold on to. If you don't have a punch that works, you could use a die, or again, trace something small that's that size of a circle. You could trace it out and then hand cut it, whatever works. If you don't have any type of circle punch die and you're not comfortable cutting the circles, just leave it as a square. Again, I'm marking the 1 1/4 inch marks on both sides of my paper, and then cutting across on that diagonal to make the kind of offset triangles or trapezoid. Trying to remember my geometry to like what you would call those pieces. I know it's not a parallelogram. I think it's trapezoid. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments below. I'm sure my daughters could correct me because geometry is fresh in their minds. So cutting these last few little pieces, and then it can add those to my baggies. I do want to touch on the prizes here real quick. There is a photo that I will share at the end of this video for the hop giveaway prize. It is huge and amazing. Kendra probably talked about it in her introduction video, and then you'll see what's involved or what's included in the prize pack in that slide. And how you can have a chance to win that prize is each of the videos today will have a passphrase. So you want to make sure you listen closely for the passphrase. There will be a link in the description box below for the giveaway form. You click on that link, you fill out the information, enter the passphrase for that video, and then submit. And you have, if you're hopping along to all the videos, then you can enter in every single video that you watch and have multiple chances to win that amazing prize. I will share my passphrase here with you towards the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. I am on cutting guide E, which goes pretty quickly because you do have some larger pieces on cutting guide E and F. So I will add those to my baggies. I get a little ahead of myself here and start on cutting guide F before I put cutting guide E away. So it takes me a minute to realize what I've done. I'm like, oh, whoops, let's put these in the appropriate baggies. And then I can finish cutting down paper F. Question for you. Have you heard of Kendra's Card Challenge before? Or is this your, like, have you participated before, or is KCC 22 your first time? I'm always interested to know like where people are in the process of Kendra's Card Challenges. She's been doing this for a while, but you know, some people may be new to paper crafting or just new to watching the videos and finding out about it. So again, there's links in the description box below where you can find out how to access the PDF. Cut these last two pieces down, and all of my pieces are cut. We'll get them put in the baggies. And then again, today I am assembling sketch 1. And then if you follow along in that playlist, you will see all 15 cards put together. And I will have several more videos throughout the quarter of my cutting guides and my assembly processes, so stay tuned for those. So sketch 1, I'm going to pull out, I have some green cardstock. It's like single-sided cardstock, like a thin cardstock, but I'm going to pull this out and I'm creating a mat. The sketch doesn't necessarily call for a mat, but I used a 4 by 5 1/4 inch card mat, pulled back out the baggie marked 1 with all of my patterned paper pieces. And then there is a mat for this pattern paper rectangle. I really wanted to use the yellow, but it wasn't quite right, so I'm going to go back to the green, cut it down according to that black outline around that pink rectangle. It gives you the individual dimensions for all the pieces, like the sketch, each sketch gives you dimensions for all of the pieces. And so the black outline is the matte layer, which you can use anything you want. So I just cut that down according to the sketch measurements. And then for that little angled strip, I just pulled out a scrap of some of the pattern paper that was a yellow, so at least I really wanted to bring yellow in on this card, so I found a way to do it. I'm going to stamp a thank you sentiment on some scrap white cardstock, and then the sketch calls for a 1 3/4 inch circle, and I happen to have a punch that will cut that, and it's perfect for this thank you sentiment. And then the black layer around that circle is, you know, a mat of your choice, and it's a 2-inch layer, so I just used a 2-inch punch and some more of that green. Now that all of my pieces are cut, I can go ahead and get it assembled. We'll add my mat down to the card base. And then I'm going to kind of lay these strips out again. I ended up changing the order a little bit from the original. Just wanted to make sure that I could see my favorite flowers and kind of dry fit them there. And then I'm just going to use some wet glue to attach the 2 outer strips to make sure that there's an even border on the top, bottom, and side of each of those strips. And then that will help me figure out where to put that middle strip. I just center it in between those 2 outer strips. You could use wet glue, tape runner, whatever adhesive you prefer. I tend to switch back and forth between tape runner and wet glue depending on the size of the piece I'm using. And since I had my wet glue out, I'm just going to go ahead and use that for the rectangle pattern piece and the mat. Center that there on those strips at the top. Add my sentiment to the green mat piece, and then we'll cut the angle in the strip and then adhere that down. So real quick, I will give you my passphrase. So we were given a question to answer for this quarter's passphrase. The question was, what is your most used crafty tool? Mine is my trimmer, because no matter what I'm making, I always have to cut paper down. So my passphrase is trimmer. So listen for that question and the answer on all of the videos that you watch, and then you will put that into the giveaway form that is linked in the description box below. I use some scrap white cardstock on the back of the circle just because it's kind of laying over different levels, and then I end up adding an extra little piece there at the bottom to help it kind of all be level. And then I wanted to add a little something. So I had this random ephemera pack from Mente Papers that I got in some kind of mystery box. And so I just picked like a little white flower, magnolia maybe, to add there behind my sentiment, and then using a scrap of the green cardstock on the inside of my card. So here is my finished card sketch number 1. Again, please be sure to check the description box for all of the links for the playlist, the informational video, how to get the download, the giveaway form for this amazing prize. I thank you all so very much for your time today and hope you all have a very crafty day.